Okay, so have you ever like just completely lost yourself like down a rabbit hole?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, like, for hours.
Yeah, like for hours about like some crazy historical event,
Uh-huh.
like where you're just glued to the screen, like reading every article, like watching every documentary.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, who hasn't?
I know, right? And like sometimes even like those dramatized movies based on like real events.
Totally.
Like I know they're not always like completely accurate,
Right.
but they like totally suck you in,
Are you,
right?
like, sure?
Well, that's kind of what we're doing today on this deep dive.
Uh-huh.
But instead of like going down the rabbit hole ourselves,
Right.
we're bringing you along for the ride,
I love it.
right into the heart of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Now, I'm guessing most of you listening have at least heard of it, right?
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Like that super intense 13-day standoff back in 1962
Mhm.
between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Yeah, when the world was, like, this close to nuclear war.
Right, like it was literally like right on the edge.
Oh, absolutely.
Now we've got a ton of material to dig into.
All right, lay it on me.
We've got historical accounts, obviously,
Soldiers.
like to get all the facts straight.
Yeah, gotta have the foundation.
But we're also diving into some of the ways this whole thing has been like portrayed in pop culture,
Ooh, that's interesting.
right? Like movies, novels, even some documentaries.
All right, so fact and fiction, huh?
Exactly. And like how those stories sometimes maybe twist the truth a little
Yeah, sometimes a lot.
or like shine a light on different angles.
Mhm.
So our mission today is to like untangle all of that,
Okay.
right? Like see how these different sources tell the story.
Right, so we're not just, like, learning what happened.
Right.
We're, like, exploring how it's been interpreted.
Exactly. And like why it still matters, like even all these years later.
'Cause it does.
Yeah. So before we jump into the like those crazy 13 days,
Okay.
we gotta like set the scene,
Yeah, paint the backdrop.
backdrop. What was the Cold War like?
Right, well, I mean, imagine, like, this okay,
Okay, I'm imagining.
you've got these 2 roommates, right?
Oh,
Who, like, absolutely cannot stand each other.
oh, I've been there.
Yeah, right? But, like, they're stuck sharing this tiny apartment.
Oh no.
And to make things even worse, they both have, like, a massive collection of weapons.
Oh wow, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
That is basically the Cold War in a nutshell.
So basically, like just constant tension,
Constant tension, yeah.
like always waiting for something to like set the other one off.
Exactly. And it wasn't just like some political squabble either.
Right. It was like a clash of ideologies.
Yeah, like capitalism versus communism.
Democracy versus like a totalitarian state.
Yeah, and that fear of like nuclear annihilation, it just hung over everything.
Okay, so then 1962 rolls around
Uh-huh.
and like things escalate big time, right?
They sure
To
did.
the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Dun dun dun.
All right, so like walk us through this. Like, how did this whole thing even start?
All right, so you've got the Soviet Union, led by Khrushchev, right?
Okay.
And they decided to secretly install these nuclear missiles in Cuba.
In Cuba?
Yeah, which is like 90 miles off the coast of Florida.
Whoa, so like right in America's backyard.
Pretty much, yeah. It was a super bold move.
And obviously the U.S. wasn't too thrilled about that.
Yeah, yeah, you could say that.
So President Kennedy has to respond, right?
Right, and like fast.
Right, because inaction is basically like a sign of weakness.
Exactly. And so those 13 days in October 1962, they become like one of the tensest periods in history.
Oh, yeah.
Like the world was watching and waiting.
So the U.S. like seriously considered like an airstrike on Cuba, right?
They did. Yeah, there were some seriously heated discussions happening.
Like, I can't even imagine the pressure.
Oh, it was immense. Like they knew any wrong move could literally trigger World War III.
So what made Kennedy ultimately choose the blockade instead?
Well, it was a gamble for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he realized that a direct military strike would almost certainly provoke a Soviet counterattack.
Right, like an eye for an eye kind of thing.
Exactly, and that would have been catastrophic.
Like, there's no winning in a nuclear war.
Nope, everyone loses.
So the blockade was like a less aggressive option, but
Yeah.
still like sending a strong message,
Right. It was a way of saying like, hey, we see you and we're not backing down.
but without like immediately resorting to violence.
Exactly, and it bought them some time to try and negotiate with Khrushchev,
So like find a way out of this mess.
hopefully.
So it's like these two superpowers, right?
Yeah.
Staring each other down,
Yep.
fingers hovering over the button.
And the whole world is just holding its breath.
It's kind of crazy how close we came to like total disaster.
It really is.
And like speaking of perspectives,
Okay.
it's so interesting how this event has been like portrayed in movies and books and stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like you've got films like 13 Days,
Uh-huh.
which like puts you right there in the room with Kennedy and his advisors.
Yeah, like you're part of those tense discussions.
Exactly. And then you got Dr. Strangelove,
Oh, yeah, classic.
which takes this like darkly satirical approach to like the whole concept of nuclear war.
Right, like it's funny, but also terrifying.
Yeah, like you're laughing, but you're also like, oh my God, this is messed up.
Right.
But it's important to remember that like these
Oh.
movies, they're not always completely accurate, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, they take creative liberties to make the story more compelling.
Right, like they got to entertain
Yeah, and sometimes they oversimplify things.
or exaggerate certain aspects.
Like in Dr. Strangelove, for example,
yeah,
the military leaders are portrayed as these like kind of bumbling warmongers.
right, like almost like caricatures.
Exactly, which isn't entirely fair.
So like a grain of salt with the movies.
Always.
And it's not just movies either, right?
Yeah.
There are tons of books that tackle this too.
Yeah, like The 10th Day,
Uh-huh.
Failsafe.
Those are both like really good ones.
Yeah, they capture that like feeling of tension and uncertainty.
Right, like those agonizing decisions that had to be made.
But again, it's through this fictionalized lens.
Yeah, like they're telling a story
Exactly. So it's
Yeah.
always good to read those alongside some factual accounts.
to get the full picture.
Right, because history is rarely black and white.
So much nuance.
So much.
Okay, so after all that, like after the world almost ended,
Right.
did we like learn anything from this?
Well, I think we did in some ways.
Like what, for instance?
Well, one pretty significant outcome was the establishment of the hotline.
The hotline.
Yeah, like a direct line of communication between Washington and Moscow.
Oh, wow. So they could like actually talk to each other?
Exactly, like no more relying on telegrams and intermediaries.
That seems important.
It was huge. Like, it was a way to prevent miscommunication and potentially avoid escalation in future crises.
So like cutting through the fog of war.
Exactly.
And the crisis also like really highlighted the whole issue of nuclear proliferation, right?
Absolutely.
Like the world saw firsthand how close we came to annihilation.
Yeah, and it scared the heck out of everyone.
So that led to the signing of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968.
Yeah, a big step towards trying to prevent another Cuban Missile Crisis.
So did it work?
Well, it's a complicated question.
So
I mean, on the one hand, it's definitely helped to limit the spread of nuclear weapons.
that's good.
Yeah. But on the other hand, there are still a lot of countries out there with nuclear capabilities.
And like tensions are always simmering somewhere.
Always.
So it's like, are we really any safer today than we were back then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's one that everyone listening should be asking themselves.
I agree, because the lessons of the Cuban Missile Crisis, they're still relevant today.
More than ever.
Yeah, we need to learn from history if we want to avoid repeating it.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I hope you all enjoyed the ride.
We covered a lot of ground today,
We did.
from the historical facts
Uh-huh.
to the pop culture portrayals.
And everything in between.
But here's the thing, like, even after all this research,
Mm-hmm.
I'm left with this, like, nagging question.
Okay, what's that?
Knowing what we know now about the dangers of escalation,
Right.
are we any better equipped to handle a similar situation today?
Like if another Cuban Missile Crisis were to happen.
Yeah, like, are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Or can we use those lessons to forge a more peaceful future?
I don't know the answer to that,
Me neither.
but I think it's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely.
So ponder away, my friends,
And until next time, stay curious.
and stay informed.
See ya.
Bye.